Good to go? Good to go? You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning and welcome once again to the headquarters of the United Workers' Party, located at Colony House in Castries. Today, the United Workers' Party has called this press conference to bring to your attention and to address a number of outstanding issues which continue to plague this government, the St. Lucia Labour Party government, since the last general elections in St. Lucia in July last year. There have been a number of inconsistencies and grave concerns by the people of St. Lucia regarding a number of different aspects of life here in St. Lucia. These including the economy, the high prices and high cost of living as it continues to rise, the concerns with regard to St. Lucia's stance as it pertains to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and a number of other issues. First at the podium this morning will be former Prime Minister and current leader of the opposition, Alan Chastney, leader of the United Workers' Party, who will present to you, as the others here today, a 6-point plan to assist the government in getting St. Lucia back on track and in playing its role as an opposition and as a part of government in working towards a better St. Lucia. Leader of the United Workers' Party, Alan Chastney.
Good morning, everyone. We stand here today with further confirmation as to the new normal in our world. A new normal that United Workers' Party, when we came into government in 2016 and had put forward our manifesto, took into serious consideration what we considered to be this new normal. And this new normal is to expect the unexpected. The numbers of exogenous shocks globally that have impacted the world and, very importantly, St. Lucia since the turn of the century are remarkable. Beginning with the impact of 9/11, followed very quickly by a global depression in 2008 to 2010, then being confronted with climate change and its catastrophic effect on the landscape of our country, the safety of our people, and more importantly, the cost of running a government. Because the reality is that we had to invest significantly in resilience building in our country. And then to be followed by the pandemic, a global pandemic which has had an impact on the global health, global mental wellness of citizens, and certainly on the economies of our world. And when we thought that we were now starting to see ourselves turn the corner on that, we're now confronted with a war in Ukraine, which is having deep geopolitical implications on a global basis. And because of the levels of unprecedented sanctions that are being imposed not only by governments around the world, but certainly by multilateral businesses, is creating a severe impact on us again. So this is what the United Workers' Party understood. And when we talked about building a new St. Lucia, it was about restructuring our economy in order for us to survive and protect our citizens from these exogenous shocks. A very important aspect of building a new St. Lucia was based on the premise of economic growth. The reality is, if in fact government had been running deficits, meaning the amount of money that the government was earning on a monthly basis was substantially less than the amount of money the government was costing. So to put it in numbers, on average, St. Lucia was earning around $80 million a month, and our costs were $100 million a month. And that is something that had been going on for almost 15 years. And the apex of that, the peak of that, was a very important statement made by the then Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Kenny Anthony, when he said something went wrong. Simply what went wrong was the lending institutions basically said no mas until you get your house in order. And getting your house in order meant that you had to balance your budget. So there was two options that the state had. Is find some way to increase its revenue or reduce its cost. And as and many other ministers of finance in the past have indicated, it's virtually impossible to reduce our operating cost. We're not even, as a country, fulfilling basic needs of our people. So what are you going to cut? The reality is what you have to do is grow. And there's two ways to grow. You can say as a government that you're entitled to revenue, and what you do is you increase taxes. But if you increase taxes on an economy that doesn't have the capacity to grow, what it's going to do is to create a reduction and a negative impact. And that's exactly what we saw when the Labour Party imposed a 15% VAT rate in St. Lucia. Yes, VAT is the most effective way of raising monies. But if you knew that that's the direction you had to go in, you had to restructure your economy to allow businesses to absorb that additional cost and to be able to grow. And so there was a constraint to growth in this country. I say that because as we speak today, we are now confronted with a significant challenge that we have not seen in a very long time. You have to go back to the 80s and the 70s as to when inflation was at the current pace that we're seeing. As an economist would say, a certain amount of inflation is a good thing. And that number tends to be around 2%. But once you start exceeding 2%, then it starts creating implications and problems throughout your economy. So I just want to spend a minute understanding how we got to where we are today. So we know that inflation will impact the cost of living for households, because basically the cost of goods are going to go up. And generally speaking, your wages don't adjust. So in essence, your net worth declines significantly. The cost of doing business is going to go up. So business profits are going to go down. And then them going down, the amount of taxes that they're going to pay are going to be impacted. And what is expected in an inflationary period is for there to be some kind of contraction. So inflation is, in essence, when the demand for products is higher than the supply of products. And so there is that pressure. And so as the increase in interest rates that's being proposed is to try to slow down the economy. And when you try to slow down the economy, it means that there's potentially going to be less tax revenue available to the government. And most importantly, and one of the things that we suffer from greatly in St. Lucia, is inflation has a much larger impact on the more vulnerable persons in our society. There are persons who are currently struggling to pay rent, to provide basic food items to their households. And the fact is, the dollar that they have is not going to purchase the same amount of things that they had. And more importantly, persons that would normally be in a position to help them, they too are also suffering. What's causing that right now? Well, we have the impact of two issues. The first one is the pandemic. And what the pandemic did is it closed down global economies. Here in St. Lucia, it impacted our tourism economy. St. Lucia's GDP in 2020 contracted by 20%. And I've heard Dominique mention it a couple of times, is we had a GDP of $5 billion. We lost $1 billion. It means $1 billion less in circulation in our economy. And 80% of that loss was tourism. And what did it mean? It meant that we could not do anything to replace that economy immediately. And so the government was running significant deficits. Government's revenue went from $110 million to $55 million on a monthly basis. And the cost of running government went from $100 million to almost $115 million. And I have been at pains, and I understand that the concept is challenging for a lot of people, for persons to appreciate that a significant impact was the bonds. We had $900 million of bonds that were due in 2020. And normally bonds in this country roll over, meaning that the persons who have bonds immediately roll those bonds over, and those who didn't, there were persons in place to purchase those bonds that they were lost. So it means that the revenue loss to the government was zero. In 2020, 25% of the bondholders decided to redeem their bonds, meaning, I need my money. Not because they had lacked confidence in the state, simply because of the pandemic. That was a form of savings for them, and they needed their cash. That's $200 million of cash on top of the additional cost of operations that the government had to find. So the pandemic had significant implications on the macroeconomics of our country. It impacted the supply chain. We immediately saw the price of freight went up. We saw the backups at the major ports around the world. And because of the pandemic impact on other global economies, particularly the ones that were producing products, there was a reduction because workers were not going to work. So there was significant supply chain issues, and we hear on TV, particularly smart chips. So cars had been modernized to the point that there were operating systems in the car now was this chip, and in the absence of the chip, they couldn't finish the cars. And so there was a significant backlog of production, and it meant that there was still a demand for a lot of products, but the world could not supply those products. The monetary policy of the then governments, like St. Lucia, was to flood the economy with money to help people cushion the pain. So income support systems, social net support systems, and the economy was infused with cash to try to keep the demand sufficient to keep the economy running. Then came now the Ukraine war. And the Ukraine war has now caused the price of fuel to skyrocket. It's been almost like a roller coaster. Made it up to last week to $140 a barrel. It went down below 90 or below $100 the beginning of this week. And as of this morning, it was back up to $115. And so we're seeing tremendous volatility in that market. And it just tells you that there is still a time before we believe the prices of oil is going to drop below the $100. It's certainly going to remain in that vicinity, and hopefully it doesn't go up to the 140, 150, and some persons are actually predicting that oil may make it to $200 a barrel. That oil price is now having a significant impact and carry-on effect to all other parts of the economy. The cost of producing other products now has gone up. Again, the supply chain is being impacted. We see today in China a significant outbreak in which has caused certain cities to be shut down, and persons are now concerned about what's going to be happening. And as I indicated, economists and central bankers now want to stop the growth of inflation. Inflation has made it to as high as 7 or 8% in some countries. And the mechanism they're choosing to do that is by increasing interest rates. And we hear these things happening abroad, and sometimes we find it difficult to translate what that's going to mean here in St. Lucia. So if in fact globally interest rates go up, it's going to have an impact on us. And if our interest rates start going up, it just means the cost of doing business, the cost of living is going to be increased. Because if you're making a small loan, the price is going to go up. If you have an existing loan that's an adjustable interest rate, it means the price of interest is going to go up. And nothing has changed. Your ability to produce anymore is not there. And the intention of that interest rate hike is to dampen the economy. So the reality is, 6 weeks ago, when this government came to Parliament and extended the barrel concession for another month, we made the point in Parliament, and we've continued to make the point over the last 6 weeks, that the government needs to come out with a plan as to how it's going to confront these inflationary pressures. Because if they go unabated, they're going to have a significant impact on the more vulnerable persons in our society. And there's also going to be a significant impact on the cost of doing business in this country and the general cost of living. And the reality is that this economy is coupled with the global economy from the beginning to the end. Some of the smaller policy positions of food security that this government keeps touting in themselves become inflationary. But the reality is a lot of our farming that's done here is dependent on fertilizer and seeds that are imported. So there's no escaping the global inflationary policy. We've also tried to highlight to the government that as bad as that situation is, not having a plan, not being able to tell people how you're going to deal with this situation creates anxiety, unnecessary anxiety. And it means as business persons, you do not know what to do. As a household, you don't know what to do. Your banks are going to struggle with what to do. And so there needs to be a coherent plan, one that can be articulated very clearly to the public of St. Lucia. And we have called upon the Labour Party for 6 weeks. And the situation has only gotten worse. So it means if in fact 6 weeks ago you didn't think that the inflationary problems that we were talking about were real, how can you not see what's taking place right now and not appreciate that this is real and the inflationary pressure is going to be here for a while? Central banks around the world are now starting to move to adjust for it, which is also going to have implications for our economy. And when you have an economy that is as dependent on tourism as we are, there are significant implications for tourism. So we've taken it upon ourselves to come up with a 6-point plan on how we believe that we could be dealing with inflation in this country. So the first part of the plan, which I will articulate very quickly, is really a reduction in the VAT rate. As you know, the VAT rate is at 12.5%. We genuinely believe that if you in fact reduce the VAT rate to 10% right now, that rate reduction is going to save the economy significantly. Because we know reduction in the VAT rate will have an immediate impact on the cost of importing goods. So when you're paying your duties, you're paying a VAT rate of 12.5%. If you reduce that to 10%, right, which is almost a 20% reduction in the rate, that means that the cost of that good will be now cheaper when it gets onto the shelves of St. Lucia. We know that it's going to impact the cost of services because VAT is applicable on services. And so as service prices may be going up, that this will be a way to counter those prices. And it certainly will encourage businesses to maintain a constant price structure that they have right now. We know in particular for construction, and we're not worried about the larger construction projects because many of them are VAT exempted, but we're concerned about the redevelopment of people's homes and smaller projects in which they're now having to buy those materials and pay VAT. And that will continue to encourage them to do so. We know that a reduction in VAT is going to help offset the price of fuel because the price of electricity has been going up. We've already seen in cooking gas how much it's gone up. We've seen in electricity prices how much it's gone up in the households, and it will continue to go up because you remember our electricity cost is the actual cost plus an energy surcharge. And that energy surcharge is increasing on a monthly basis. And the fact is that the attempts by my government in restructuring this country, and I will highlight some of those things afterwards, which is the 5 to 5 program, in terms of putting healthcare insurance, unemployment insurance, direct social support to homes. So in the absence of that being in place and trying to deal with the vulnerable, reducing the VAT rate immediately is going to give some of those people some relief. So that being said, I would like to invite my colleague and chairman of our party to address you and to give you 3 other points, I believe, of our plan that we're proposing to the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader of the Opposition and Leader of the United Workers' Party, Alan Chasney. Next at the podium will be Chairman of the United Workers' Party, Mr. Andy Daniel. And taking into consideration the war in the Ukraine right now, the fallout from COVID-19 and other issues directly affecting the economy of St. Lucia, the Chairman of the party will address a number of issues relating to economic development and our recovery from the current situation and the shocks that will inadvertently affect St. Lucia. Chairman of the party.
Good day, everyone. Since the advent of the dreaded pandemic in 2020, Caribbean economies, of which St. Lucia is no exception, has been navigating challenging and exceptional times. While there was economic contraction associated with the impact of the crisis, it was as a result of prudent and visionary economic stewardship by the then UWP government. We see, as pointed out by CDB, increased economic growth and St. Lucia economy growing by 6.8% compared to other member states. What this tells us is that despite the political rhetoric of the then opposition, now government, the then UWP government through strategic direction and leadership provided and laid the foundational planks for economic uplift of the St. Lucian economy. It is without any apology that the United Workers' Party embraces this proud economic achievement for the people of St. Lucia. This is a reflection of the sound macroeconomic policies embarked by the Alan Chasney-led UWP government. What do we see happening now since the government came into power? Unfortunately, it appears that in response to the global phenomenon, our Prime Minister, as the captain of our economy, has put his hands up and surrendered to the possibility of solutions. Like a defeated captain, he has abandoned ship and has told us all to perish under the weight of rising costs of living. When we ask about possibility of relief from the global inflation problem, the Prime Minister indicated that nothing can be done to curb the current situation of rising living expenses. Yes. In an earlier public showing, the Prime Minister outlined the sum total of his economic plan. Eat more green figs. This is, St. Lucia, not good enough. Frankly, unacceptable. And confirms widespread suspicions that this government is without answers to the many issues that you, the people of St. Lucia, care about. These issues include out-of-control crimes on the island, rising cost of living, persistent high unemployment rate. While the Prime Minister and his cabinet remain clueless to finding solutions to the global inflation and its effects on us, many Caribbean leaders are announcing measures to bring relief to their citizens. Why not St. Lucia? Our neighboring islands understands how this difficult economic situation is wreaking havoc on our pockets. The United Workers' Party is therefore, as the political leader has outlined, proposing a 6-point plan. The United Workers' Party sounds an urgent call for the government to continue and expand the electricity bill support initiative that the United Workers' Party carried out at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. By reinstating this program, making it available to more vulnerable households, pain will be relieved for many families in St. Lucia. The next program, extending a helping hand to our farmers and providing seeds, fertilizers, and animal feeds to bolster local livestock and crop production. However, production must be complemented by guaranteeing markets for our farmers, so they will have the confidence to go out and produce. It is our firm view that the produce from farmers should be purchased by government and distributed to vulnerable households. And St. Lucia, this was a program that you welcomed during the time of the island-led UWP administration. Simply putting our hands up and surrendering and saying nothing can be done is not an option, Mr. Prime Minister. The Prime Minister and the ministers of Cabinet must lead on this issue and reduce the burden on the people of St. Lucia. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman of the United Workers' Party, Andy Daniel. Next at the podium, as we roll along, will be Dominic Fede, who will address 3 other pointers in the 6-point plan to rescuing St. Lucia. Dominic Fede.
Thank you very much, Norbert. Thank you. Good morning to our political leader, Chairman Daniel, and Senator Herod Stanislaus from Soufrière, and good morning, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. A special good morning to the people of Ancillary Canaries and indeed the people of St. Lucia. Many families today are anxious, even frustrated by the cost of everyday essentials, priced way above their means. I speak today on behalf of the vulnerable among us, who may be ashamed or even afraid to raise their voices. Single mothers, pensioners, the underpaid, and the unemployed. Today I sound my voice so that this uncaring government can hear yours. Enough is enough. No more victimization. No more vindictive settling of political scores. No more closing of radio stations. It is time that a government elected on a range of promises deliver on them now. The pain that you feel is real, and the struggle that persists is deep. We come today to plead to the government on your behalf. We come at a time when they willingly afford trips to Dubai, but no relief for you, the people of St. Lucia, in the wake of this global inflation situation. At a time when they give millions in projects to their friends, but put their hands up when it comes to finding solutions for you, the people of St. Lucia, to ease your pain. We don't want to just be an opposition party without a plan. Because as the chairman has indicated, this government has been elected without a plan. We come with solutions to the nagging reality of the rising cost of living. Therefore, the following items have seen massive increases in shops and supermarkets. Canned tuna fish, for example. LPG 20-pound cylinder gas. LPG 22-pound cylinder gases have also seen sharp increases. If you are our bus drivers have warned of fare increases, whilst in our hardware stores, a sheet of plywood has climbed as high as $200. Shortages on basic items like brown sugar persist, while we hear a set of excuses from the government of the day. The time has now come for less talk and urgent action from the current SLP administration. In addition to those measures outlined today by our chairman and our political leader, we call on the government to implement these additional 3 measures immediately to ease the pain on you, the people of St. Lucia. They include: 1. Maintain the current price for a gallon of gasoline fuel at gas stations. This will allow our bus drivers to remain at stable prices for commuters who use public transportation, as well as individuals who commute by private cars. Scrap the recent increases in the 20-pound and the 22-pound cylinder of LPG cooking gas and reinstate the original price. The current increases will only add to the burdensome high inflation which continues to pressure many vulnerable households. Number 3, make good on the $1,000 promised in $1,500 promised in income support to many small businesses and self-employed persons. I am here and I must remind St. Lucians that upon being re-elected, the Prime Minister said that he didn't say that. He was on Andre Paul's show asking and challenging us to find the tape. And the tape did emerge, showed that while on the campaign train, he said that the 500 offered by the United Workers' Party government was insufficient for the vendors, and that if he was elected, that he would have tripled it to 1,005. And so, Mr. Prime Minister, today the people need the 1.5. The taxi drivers, the vendors, the fishermen, and several self-employed individuals require the 1.5 in an effort to be able to ease the pain that they feel from this global inflation. St. Lucians would remember well, at the height of the COVID pandemic, the United Workers' Party administration mobilized 6,000 additional self-employed persons and some 11,000 registered employees, a total of 17,000 of collective help that we gave to people who were displaced from their jobs or people whose businesses were not operating as a result of the pandemic. This is how a caring government, in difficult times, you lead and you find solutions, putting your hands up and to tell reporters that there is nothing you can do about the rising prices in our supermarkets is not good enough. It is simply unacceptable, and we reject and debunk today the suggestion that nothing can be done. Mr. Prime Minister, you don't have to go far. Just look across the waters to our borders and you will see that urgent action is being done to reduce the cost of living on citizens of other Caribbean countries. I thank you very much.
I have one more thing to add.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dominic Fede. Since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the ongoing war over in that country has serious implications for St. Lucia and the rest of the world. Leader of the opposition, Alan Chasney, will highlight a number of serious concerns as far as measures and sanctions taken by the rest of the world and St. Lucia's position on continuing its CIP application processing for Russian and Belarusian citizens and applicants.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. I want to thank my colleagues for their presentations today. I thought that they articulated the facts extremely well, and hopefully the general public understands that there are solutions to some of our problems. I want to again talk about putting people first, and that is right now with what's taking place globally. One, the reduction of the VAT rate. Two, an agricultural support program, which would include subsidizing inputs as well as guaranteeing markets. Three, electricity support, the likes of what we have done during the pandemic, and household support in helping them reduce the cost of electricity. Four, fixing and maintaining the gas at the pump, because if we allow the gas at the pump to increase, it'll have even greater implications for the rest of our economy. Cooking gas, which we've seen go up, to at least bring the 20 and 22 pound gas cylinders back down to the levels that they were pre this recession, and certainly in fulfilling the $1,500 promise. I also want to indicate that if in fact that this government is not careful and understanding what is taking place and to take it seriously, it will have major implications on our competitiveness as a country, not only from a manufacturing perspective, but certainly from a tourism perspective. I felt it was important because I've just returned from a trip from the States, and there's nothing better than witnessing something firsthand. The reality is I went to 2 different major cities, and the support for the Ukrainians on a global basis, but certainly I can speak to the 2 cities I went to, is unprecedented. At night, buildings are lit up in the colors of the Ukrainian flag. People are carrying the Ukrainian flag with them. And what we saw with globally as to how quickly the Western world has moved to put sanctions on both Belarus as well as Russia. But here's the interesting part, is that those sanctions by governments have been followed up now by multilateral businesses. And people are making impactful decisions against their bottom lines. Companies who have spent years building up their operations in Russia have simply closed their doors. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, just to name 2 who've invested billions. Oil companies. And in essence, there is a singular voice right now in the Western world when it comes to Russia and Belarus. And it's very sad, but it's real. And I say that to emphasize even greater that my misunderstanding but of the inconsistency of this government, that this government would have participated in an OAS vote and abstained from voting on this issue, turn around and be one of the last persons to finally support the resolution at the UN, which the opposition supported them on. But then to turn around and have your Minister of Investment and particularly the Minister of CIP to make a public pronouncement that while all of the other CIP countries in this region, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica and Grenada, have agreed to impose sanctions and to block Russians and persons from Belarus from applying for citizenship, because that it would be a natural flight. That they understood the magnitude of what's taking place, but that this government cannot do that, and that this government is putting at risk solutions. Because if in fact that they proceed to process Russian applications or persons from Belarus's applications through our CIP program, and the Western world decides now to impose sanctions, it's not going to be against those individuals, it's going to be against our country. We've already seen pronouncements by both the US and Europe asking for an end to our CIP programs. And what moral authority are we going to have to stand there and advocate against that policy when in fact that we could not get our act together and to see what the world is doing morally? And so it would not surprise me if in fact the Europeans take away the Schengen visa from us. And I can say to you, your CIP program, our CIP program would be worthless if that were to happen. But more importantly, for solutions to appreciate that there's a further threat that's saying that the British and the Americans are going to impose stricter visa restrictions. So in the case of the UK, where we can go there visa-free, the likelihood is if we pursue this issue, that we could see the imposition of visa applications to go to the UK. And as difficult as it is to get a US visa, it will now become almost impossible. But I want to put this government on notice that there are further things that could happen. I refuse to say them because I don't want to put any blight on our country. Unlike the Labour Party, United Workers' Party wants to see the country do well, regardless as to who the people have selected to lead this country. And you will never hear us threatening foreign direct investors into this country. You will never hear us making statements wishing ill will on the people of St. Lucia. But I can say that we need to be careful, because the emotional attachment behind this issue is real and people are moving quickly. And we do not want to be caught in the gunfire of this issue. This issue has implications for international law. We are a country that obtained our independence through treaty, meaning that we didn't fight for it. It was an agreement. Ukraine got its independence after the collapse of the USSR through a treaty. And that's what made the vote against Crimea in 2014, when we abstained from that vote. Abstained from voting to sanction a country that had breached an international agreement and had gone back into Crimea. And here we see now in 2022 that that was just the beginning of the plan. So I want to say to this government, they need to come out and join the other countries and put sanctions on Russians applying for CIP into this country. And they need to make it very clear to the Western leaders that they support the boycott that is taking place. They need to continue to do everything they can to cause Russia to withdraw from Ukraine and resurrect Ukraine's independence. This is a big boy fight, a big man's fight. And St. Lucia cannot afford to get caught in the crosshairs on this issue. And I'm appealing to them, and in the absence of them listening, because this is a government that doesn't listen. It's a government that has developed a pattern of behavior since it came into office that is frightening. And when one understands that pattern of behavior, that will lead into the discussion that we will have next week when we will talk about crime. And we think that crime is of a significant issue, that we should deal with it separately and dedicate a press conference only towards that. So at this point, I'd like to open up if there's any questions that the media may have. We'd be very happy to answer them. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Leader of the United Workers' Party and Leader of the Opposition, Alan Chasney, Chairman of the United Workers' Party, Andy Daniel, and also Senator Dominic Fede. Thank you very much for joining us once again at the headquarters of the United Workers' Party at Colony House in Castries. Those of you viewing us on GVD TV and listening on Sky FM, thank you so much for joining us once again. Next week, the United Workers' Party will have right here another press conference to address individually the serious crimes and situation of crime which has gone absolutely out of hand over the past few months. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm Norbert Williams. Have a great day.